Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Check Service Industry Podcast. I am Reyshan Parker, and if you haven't yet, please go watch my television series Beyond the Check Worker Owner Edition, now streaming on Amazon Prime and Tubi TV. I hang out with some fantastic chef owners, find out about their lives, the history of the restaurants, and of course, they cook up and let us try some of the best dishes they have to offer. Also, go follow us on Tastemade, because, you know, sometimes I do live stuff. Anyway. I have a fantastic guest today. He is an MD who has had an epiphany recently on how to improve people's lives through their own personal self-improvement. I believe there's 10 steps to that. But he has a fantastic new book out called New You, Who Knew. Ladies and gentlemen, David R. Edwards.
And even the Emmels out there. Hey, everybody's welcome. This is a no judgment zone.
Come on, come all. So, hi,
well,
David.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So, you've been a doctor for over 35 years, or you worked in the healthcare industry for over 35 years?
Yeah, I need to clarify. I'm not a physician.
You're not a physician?
No, other than my great uncle used to call me Doc when I was a little boy. It was not a sign of things to come. But my initials DR, sometimes that's confusing, but I'm not a doctor. I have a master's degree in healthcare administration. So I've been on the back end stuff, the healthcare finance and healthcare operations, and most recently as a CEO of a health center.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed it. I mean, my career has been very non sequitur kind of a thing. You know, I started off, I was going to college, and I worked in various things, you know, as a bookkeeper or something to earn money to go to school, and finally landed a job. So this dates me a little bit, but I was making $3 an hour, and I saw an ad, because we used to find our jobs in the newspaper, if anybody remembers what those are. And so in the newspaper, because I needed to make more money, I couldn't afford tuition the next quarter. I was getting kind of desperate, and I saw a job paid $7 an hour. I mean, like, the current federal minimum wage tells you how out of date that is. But
Was
that
the $3.15, or was it $3, $2.75? My first job was $3. So
was it? Yeah.
Yeah, like my very first job, but I was like 12 or something.
Oh yeah.
It was like,
well, no,
yeah.
I was 23 years old, so I think my whole career has been a little different. So I joined a church, and I served a mission for my church when I was 19. And so 19 to 21, I was in France trying to teach people the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it was a marvelous experience. But when I got home, so I was 21, and that's when I started school. So I was a little older than some of the kids. Still a kid, but
but you got to world travel a little, so that's
yeah. Oh, it was amazing.
That's a leg up.
Yeah, and I know it's funny because I was dirt poor over there, and I lived on $200 a month, and yeah, I ate out one time. Can you imagine that? 2 years in France, I ate out one time.
What did you eat?
I ate food that I made myself that was cheap. Sometimes a can of peas. I mean, and
a baguette? Did you at least get a baguette?
Yeah, we get a baguette. We loved, and they're made every morning fresh, and
So the one night you did go out, what did you treat yourself to?
We went to what's called a crêperie, which is a crepe restaurant. Mm-hmm. So it's like you'd have like an appetizer of crepes, and then the main course would have some meat and mushrooms and stuff in it, and then you'd have a dessert crepe. So it was all crepes.
It's all crepes.
But, and it was wonderful. I mean, and I ate at people's homes a lot, which frankly is maybe even better. Mm-hmm. Because, these were just cooking, as you know, in France is amazing. And
even the home cooks don't mess it up. Huh?
I mean, the home cooks are amazing. And, this was in the late 70s, early 80s. And at that time, McDonald's had, like a handful of restaurants in France in the big cities, mostly for tourists. So you want mediocre food in France? Well, there's a McDonald's for you. So, but it's consistent, right? That's their thing. It's consistent. So
a Royale with cheese.
Yeah. But I mean, people would invite us into their homes and they would feed us. And boy, and it depended on what region you're in, right? Because there's different regions. Will have their own wine, their own cheese, their own cuisine. And so depending on where I was, we had, and the simplest things, like, and I can't remember what she called this, but like we were in central France up in the mountains, and a woman made us this, it's like a soup, but it's just all kinds of different vegetables, some salt and pepper, very simple spices.
A stone soup.
Pressure cook it, and then she would strain it, and it was like a broth almost, more than, but the flavor of it was spectacular. And she had her own garden, and everybody buys food fresh every morning. There's none of this. Well, and today it's probably different, but back in those days, there was no Costco. So people would go to the various...
Is there a Costco in France now? I'm going to have to Google
I bet there is. I mean, they had a place called Carrefour, and it's kind of like in the western U.S. I'm not sure where you're at, Reyshan, but...
I'm in Georgia. I'm in
Georgia,
Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here that's called Fred Meyer, and I think they have the same idea. My daughter and son-in-law live in Utah. They have a place called Smith's. And it's kind of like you got the grocery store and auto parts, and you can buy clothes, and like a Walmart kind of an idea.
More so like the Woolworths back in the day.
Woolworth back in the day, right? And so they had a place in the 70s called Carrefour, only in the big cities. So like in Bordeaux, I was in Bordeaux for a while. And there was a Carrefour there, but none of the smaller towns had anything like that. So typical for a normal person was you would buy groceries fresh in the morning, and you would prepare what you're going to eat that day, right? And the next day repeat.
Do it again.
Because you would buy everything fresh. Your bread, your meat, your cheese, your whatever you're going to have.
Grab your parsnips and your...
Exactly.
Head on back home to make breakfast.
Exactly. We had one time a guy made us this, it was Thanksgiving in the United States. And so he kind of liked American culture, and he had a little bit more money than a lot of people. So he invited us over for Thanksgiving dinner, which they don't celebrate in France. Right, exactly. But, there was no internet back then. But he was able to find, they bake a turkey at Thanksgiving and they do stuffing. And so we had stuffing with truffles. And it was off the charts spectacular. This guy had this Swedish wood-fired oven that was, like a several $1,000 oven back in those days. And it was just marvelous. I mean, and you get the interaction with individuals. You're just human beings, right? And we're breaking bread together, and it was really a joyful experience.
Have you been back to France since your teens?
Just one time. You need two things to do that kind of stuff normally, right? You need to have the time, and you need to have the money. And sometimes we had the money, but no time. And sometimes we had time, but no money. And like today, that would be the case right now. And so, but we went back, my wife and I, around our 20th anniversary.
Oh, nice.
And I'd been working for a healthcare business for about 11 years. And it basically dissolved and got absorbed into a big hospital and some doctors groups and things. It's a long story, but I had time and I had a little bit of money. And so we went back to France and had a joyful, wonderful visit.
ate out more than once this time, though.
We ate out more than once. That's very true. Yeah. Very,
Well, that's
very.
good.
I mean, just the food is amazing. So it's fun. Anyways,
Indeed.
so I'd done a number of things though. Like, so I worked in Africa for a while. Food there is very different again. I was in Nigeria commissioning a hospital with an international group. So we had, people from America, people from England, from different places around the world, who would come help. This guy was a chief, seriously a tribal chief who had been a very successful businessman. In food, actually, some of it. He was the match king of Africa. He made more matches in Africa than anybody else.
Matches,
anyways,
like fire starters,
like wooden
matches.
strike your matches, right? And
the match mogul of Africa. All right,
still very necessary over there in 2005 when I was there. But
probably still.
Anyways, it was a marvelous project that we were able to work on. I've worked with the elderly. I worked in tribal health in Alaska. So a consortium of tribal governments who pulled together their healthcare resources and authorities and created this nonprofit that served all of Southeast Alaska, mostly native populations, but in some communities it was the only healthcare. So we served everybody.
So that's okay. I'm super interested in that. So the tribal communities who normally don't have, I mean, would they be able to subscribe to, I guess, regular insurance programs? I suppose.
They can.
But
so there's a certain level of healthcare services that are provided by the United States government
for tribes.
Yeah. And so like there's this thing called the Indian Health Service. And traditionally the Indian Health Service, as a part of our commitment, to say, hey, we stole everything from you, so in return, we'll give you a little bit of reservation land and
minimal health care.
Kind of minimal level of health care.
Shocking.
That's a little cynical, but completely untrue. And
so
Alaska,
that wasn't really enough, right? So they wanted to form their own basically healthcare system with their own personal insurance company, or like,
so
or more of like a health network.
Some tribes they've done this thing, and I don't want to get into all the technical stuff. There's federal law that guides these things, but a lot of tribes, over the years basically said, we don't want your lousy healthcare from the Indian Health Service. And not that they don't do some great things, because a lot of people still do use it, a lot of tribes. But some said, we think we could do this better. So it's kind of like if you're a kid, right? And you had parents, and your parents fed you and they clothed you and they put a roof over your head. This is kind of the relationship, the federal government, to tribes who, on reservations and whatnot. And so what some tribes said was, we're kind of grown up now, and I think that we can do a better job. So you just give us the amount of money you would have spent providing these things. And rather than you doing this for me, I think I can serve my people better, and they will be more successful, create jobs, all that stuff, if you just give us the money and let us, kind of do it our own way.
And they agreed?
And so they set up a process where people could do what's called compacting. And again, there's specific regulations that kind of guide this process. But so in Alaska, which is quite different from the rest of the U.S., because there were no reservations. Actually, I think there was one reservation in all of Alaska. And in the 1970s, you might recall, we discovered this thing called oil up there. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, a lot of this oil would be potentially on tribal lands. And the state senator at the time said, we got to figure out what we're going to do so we're not in this legal morass for the rest of our existence. And so they very rapidly went through this process of recognizing tribes in Alaska.
And then paying them for the mineral rights?
Well, and basically they did a number of different things. So they set up and they said, we're going to set you up with corporations. We're going to give you grants of land. We're going to give you some cash. And we're going to allow this compacting process. So there's a number of pieces that kind of fell together, but basically it was, we're going to set you up with this kind of bolus that should allow you to be self-governing, to be successful, and to kind of do things the way you want to do them. We're not going to tell you how to do it. You do that on your own. And they like this. And they said, in return, you give up all of the oil rights.
Oh, there's the catcher. There it was. I knew there was a shoe that was going to drop at some point.
Well, exactly right.
I was like, the government's being real nice right now. What's going on?
Well, the whole idea was to not have legal battles and ongoing disputes.
Right.
It's like, well, this is coming up. We know it's a deal. So we're going to deal with it, and we're going to try to create something that everybody feels like they're
and the tribes
winning.
are like, that's cool. Take the oil.
Yeah. Well, no. and so they have. Well, anyways, and it's just a lot of different things. And so in Alaska, what you find is that there are tribes that are federally recognized, and they compact with the government. So for some of these services, so they get the money and get to do their own thing. But as well, they have these businesses. And many of them have become large, successful international businesses. And they invest things like, Alaska is really, if we look at it, it's like a third world country.
There's not a lot there.
There's not a lot there. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot of land and a lot of mountains and a lot of fish,
snow,
some gold, some oil. The big things are extraction industries, fishing, and tourism. And so, that's what third world countries have, frankly. And so, and it's a long ways from any population centers, right? I mean, it's a long ways.
I mean, you got to ship everything. So, it might as well be Hawaii.
Yeah, well, yeah. So transportation is a challenge and all those kinds of things. So, but it worked, I think generally it's worked very well for the tribes. And most of the tribes, if they're well managed, they have these successful businesses and they've invested in things, like I said, all over the world. They have lumber businesses, they have extraction businesses, industries, from the land that they have. And anyways,
so maybe sometimes they run the companies that do the drilling, but not actually the oil itself.
It can be. Yeah, it just depends. Yeah.
What do you think was worth more, the healthcare or the oil itself?
Well, anymore, I don't know.
Right.
Well, the oil someday, and they knew this, right? In Alaska, the state government, unusual as that seems, was actually pretty brilliant. And they said oil at some point runs out. We don't know when. We have guesses. But, at some point, this will run out. So what they've done is they take the money they get from oil, the state, from oil revenue, and they set a portion of it aside. And they've basically created like an endowment. And they draw on this endowment to balance their budget. Because they figure that someday when the oil dries up, we want to have a big bolus of money. So it's like what Saudi Arabia and other, oil-rich countries have done. Unfortunately, not Nigeria. It's a whole other story from when I was working over there. But
poor Nigeria. That's for another day.
Yeah, Norway, those kinds of countries, they've got these huge reserves of cash. And, they invest it, and it's kind of got a life of its own because they know at some point these resources will run dry. And then, we've got to have something to live on because we're used to a standard of living that you couldn't sustain by what's here, normally. And so Alaska was smart in that way. And they also wanted to benefit all the people, right? So they have the PFD, the Permanent Fund. And so, again, it's this kind of endowment that's set aside. And if the investments do well, if you live in Alaska, you're, a resident, every year you get a check.
What?
Yep.
Really?
You get a check out of this endowment. And
only in Alaska, huh?
Yep. And so it's just, very unique environment. But I'd wanted to work with tribal groups, frankly, in healthcare, because what they do is they look at all the elements of their life from a cultural lens. including healthcare. So unlike a lot of medicine, Western medicine, the typical medicine in Georgia or in Washington State where I live.
Your pills and your shots and your pills and your pills.
Exactly. And so they look at it as a part of a whole. It's a part of their spiritual life. It's a part of their physical life, their mental life, their cultural life, right? And so we try to look at healthcare from the perspective of a whole person. And I really wanted to kind of experience that firsthand. So we had a hospital, we had medical care, dental care, physical therapy, eyeglasses,
the whole shebang.
A sweat lodge. Because that was a part of, health in that Native American or Alaska Native culture.
I mean, we have saunas.
Yeah, well, there you go. And if you are from Sweden, it would be a part of your cultural health experience. And so
cold places, I feel like.
Exactly.
Tent for steams and sweats, right?
So these were all marvelous experiences. It wasn't like this, career where I worked for a little place and then a bigger place and then a bigger place and finally tried to be in charge of the biggest place, which is a typical career trajectory kind of a thing. I wanted to have different experiences with different kinds of populations and people in different positions. But I would say overall, through most of my career, I've worked with people who have maybe a few more barriers than average, maybe lower income, maybe cultural barriers, maybe economic barriers, et cetera, and trying to be of service. And the last 10 years, I was CEO at community health centers. And the whole idea there is that when you come into the health center, are a whole person. And particularly in this last organization I worked with, we had an amazing group of people. And it was a privilege for me to be there. And they really had honed in on this idea that you, Reyshan, are the captain of the care team. So when you come to our health center, there might be a physician or a nurse practitioner, a dentist or a hygienist, a nurse, a community health worker, a health coach. We might have a Zumba class for you. We might have a living well with chronic conditions class. We might have all these different things, right? Services, if you will, that you could take advantage of. But what was fundamentally essential is that you are the captain.
In charge of you.
You are in charge of you, exactly, not us. We're not going to have you come in, kind of poke and prod you a little bit, and then say, oh, do this, and if you do what I tell you to do, you're a good patient. And then we pat you on the head and send you on your way, right? That's the typical kind of model. And especially these days where the stressors and the kind of the economic world, since unfortunately healthcare has become all about economics, it seems.
In the U.S.
In the U.S., yes. That, you only get 5 minutes. and
you're lucky if you actually get to see the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's very different. So this model was very different, and it was by design. It was on purpose because we felt this was going to be more effective.
Oh, totally.
And in fact, over time, our quality became the best quality in the region. We eliminated any disparities in health outcomes between our minority and majority populations of patients.
By self-empowering them to help themselves.
Exactly. And so we got ourselves, an organization that struggled financially. I don't do everything well, but one of the things I do pretty well is to kind of figure out, how do we make a living here? And so how can we do better at that? But it still retains the reality of the fact that we're all human beings, we're not machines. And so how do we make a living as human beings in a way that, pursues our mission and is integrity to our values?
And allows everyone the opportunity to visit the center.
Yeah. And frankly, in the process of this, people wanted to come to us, right? We had a big waiting list of people who wanted to come see us and engage with us around their healthcare journey. And so got in a position where we had some money finally. We had a good reputation. We had great quality. We had great staff. And we needed to build a new building. I had moved as the CEO into a closet, and I moved out of my closet so I could put 3 dentists in my closet. and it was a big closet, but still. And
so what'd you do? Work in the hallway?
Well, we actually rented a little space outside the health center itself because there just wasn't room. And so we kind of filled it as full as it could get. And we got in the position where we actually then could, all the things lined up, and we started designing a new health center that would be twice as big. And instead of being built and designed around the traditional model, where you are a bit or a part of a person, right, which is the traditional model, the dentist is on that side of town, the doctor's on that side of town, your therapist is in the middle someplace or way over there, right? But we had everything wrapped together, including a place to do a Zumba class and to learn how to cook food that's healthy and delicious, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we pulled it all together. We were designing this thing, and we actually started the construction process as we kind of wrapped up the details. And I had this first epiphany. It was basically, we're trying to fix what's wrong with healthcare in America in a way that's human-oriented, patient-centered, respects the staff as human beings, and is sustainable, right? It's affordable and effective, much, much more effective, hopefully.
Can you open one of those in Savannah? Because we need that.
Yeah, you do. Well, we all do, don't we?
Where is this? Where is this?
This was in Oregon.
Oregon, all right.
Hood River and the Dalles, kind of north central Oregon. Fairly rural,
Oregon
agricultural.
makes sense. Yeah.
And
forward-thinking place.
It is very forward-thinking. I felt very privileged to be a part of the things that were going on. I was on the board of a Medicaid reform, healthcare reform kind of effort called CCOs, Coordinated Care Organizations, and those are whole nother stories. But anyways, so we started to build the building, and I had this epiphany, and I realized unless we can do something to help the individual patient to be more effective and fulfilling this role as the captain of the care team, we will.
Because when they go home, they still need to care.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. And after working for over 30 years in healthcare, I was a little embarrassed, but I'm not that prideful. So I started asking the question. I had this great multidisciplinary team of folks to engage with, and I started asking, well, what are the skills? What would help them be the captain of the care team? And as we had these discussions, I realized the second epiphany was that it's about change. Like, how do we manage and take a leadership role in the changes that are happening in our lives, so that we're not only coping with external change, right? So like early in my career, the idea of getting on a computer and talking to you in Georgia with video was, sci-fi, literally.
Right.
I mean, this wasn't going to happen, especially, for not very much money. And so today, this is reality. This is the norm, right? We've got to keep up with these kinds of changes that are going on around us. But more importantly, for our discussion, is this capacity to be the captain of my own change process, right? How can I not be the victim of change, not be the pawn, like Pinocchio, who's pulling my strings, but how am I the captain of my own change process? Because that's really the joy and success in life, is as we make changes that are self-directed and that are focused on our values, our purpose, our goals, right? How can we do that in a way that's balanced, that recognizes our humanity, so we're not beating ourselves up all the time. It maintains our self-esteem and it moves us forward in that way. And so it was about change, and I was studying change models.
And you came up with like a 10-step kind of program in the book, right?
Well, exactly. So that was kind of the next step. So I got myself fired from that job.
Oh, good job.
I know. I know. That was
good
unfortunate.
Good for you, sir.
But I didn't steal any money or anything like that. But we had a disagreement with the board, and I had lost that argument. And so I had some time. It's one of those situations where I had some time in my hands, and I said, I just had this deep kind of in my soul feeling, this is really important, right? So I put all these change models up, and I realized at the core, at the very foundation of every model is this idea of personal motivation. So then I had to ask, well, what, motivation for me as a employer, as a leader of an organization, was how do I get employees to do what I want them to do? And that's what every business in the country is thinking about when you talk about motivation. How do I get Reyshan to show up on time to work? How do I get him to be nice to the customers, et cetera, et cetera?
I feel
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I feel like that's that's not always the priority for the majority of companies, at least on the like field level, or on the associate level, right? But maybe in the executive offices, it's more like that, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes from the executives to the underlings, I don't know that they really think through what keeps employees. I don't think, like everywhere, from everything from the uniforms that people have to wear to the time scheduling that they have to like having managers who are empowering managers as opposed to just authority managers. Right. And I don't know. I mean, companies definitely need someone to come in and tell them how to care about the people under them.
It's so true. Well, and that's a whole nother discussion that I've had, some podcasts have different focus, right? And some of the more business ones, I talk about this mechanical metaphor that pervades business and society. And frankly, in my lifetime, in my career, has been allowed to run amok and created all kinds of serious human natural dysfunction. I think that's another discussion, but anyways, I would totally agree with you.
We could spend a couple hours here, David.
Yeah, exactly. So then, but what I was thinking about was, how do I generate motivation and direction for my own life? And as I studied this, as you noted, I didn't like invent these things. So these things have been around since the dawn of time, right? Since human beings have been around. And so, what I found, though, was that there are 10 principles in 3 kind of broad areas. And the areas are our values as a foundation. So getting away from a mechanical metaphor, think about like a tree, a beautiful fruit tree. What's your favorite fruit?
Apples.
Apples. Okay, wonderful apples. So these are the best Honeycrisp apples you could ever imagine, right? Good choice. So you got to start with the strong roots, right? They've got to go deep and wide. They've got to bring in all that moisture and nutrition, from the soil. That's really the foundation of every tree that wants to produce that wonderful fruit. And then you got to have a trunk, right? That trunk has to both be strong and flexible. And then you've got branches, right? These are kind of the foundations. You need all of those things before you can have leaves and fruit. Without those, foundations, you never get the stuff fruit that you really want. And so what I discovered was these are foundations that apply to all domains of our life. These foundations apply whether you've got a master's degree or a PhD or no degree, never graduated from high school. It doesn't make any difference. Doesn't matter what your race is, what your gender is, what your background is, what you've done in the past, what you've screwed up on or done well. None of those things matter. It doesn't matter because these are universal to the human condition. So you and I and all those listening or watching, right, we're human beings. These apply to you. And so that was beautiful to me. So it's not just the healthcare journey, right? Being the captain of my healthcare team or my healthcare journey. It's about being the captain of my own life. And not a pawn of what everybody else wants me to do. And not that they are all evil or want ill for me, right? But it's just that we should be in charge of our own lives. And so it starts with this kind of foundation.
And the second you are, miracles happen.
Well, good things will happen. And
good things.
And I was very careful in the book because I wrote it for people in the front lines. The people that got to show up and go to work and work a shift. I took a job for 6 months at the Home Depot. And just because I haven't worked in the front lines in so long, so I was a plumbing associate. And I opened at 5 a.m. some days. And then the next day they would have me close until 11 p.m. And it was, that kind of monkey business. But I wanted to work in there and just be the frontline guy who just does what he's told to do, because I wanted to kind of have that experience and write this with some integrity to what is life like, in that kind of a situation, which is where life is, frankly, for tens of millions of people in the United States alone.
Yep.
And so I wanted to have some integrity to that. And as I wrote, and continued to research and think and ponder these things, it just became more beautiful and more profound to me. So the first step is always to create this foundation, this roots of our values. And the second kind of theme is, how do I get more effective at controlling my life? Some of my friends who are Christians, they say, I've given my life to Jesus. And I go, but you don't have any control over your life. So what really have you given him? It's just, you've got to have something to offer. And if you can't have a modicum of control over your life, you're not going to have anything to offer. And you're not going to be successful. I don't care what it is you're doing or where you're at. And so that's kind of the second foundation. And the third one is what's about self-esteem and maintaining our self-esteem in a human way, using principles of self-compassion. And what you've got with these three thematic areas, and then the 10 principles that kind of split up between those three areas, is that you have this foundation that honors you as an imperfect, flawed human being who is doing your best and getting a little bit better, maybe not every day, but every week, every month, right? You just need a little bit of time.
Don't be too hard on yourself about it.
Well, you just can't, because it doesn't serve you well. And that's what the science tells us is, when you beat up on yourself, you actually take your capacity to deal with the problem that you're struggling with, and it decreases it. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you have compassion, self-kindness, you increase your capacity to deal with that very problem. So do you want to kick yourself in the butt, or do you want to give yourself a hand? It's a choice, right?
It's all choices. Every second of every moment of every day, your thoughts are making choices, right?
It's so true.
And one of the hardest things for people to do is just to control their thoughts and their emotions, right?
Exactly.
And it takes some meditating, right? But it's totally possible. If you don't want to feel that way, you feel that way. Feel that way for and feel it fully, and then let it go and decide how you want to feel next, right?
Exactly.
Because you literally have the power to do so.
You do. And this isn't rocket science, right? And again, so my book is not written as the master course for people, with a psychology degree who are, developing their perfect life or something. It's just for everyday people. And so I never just say you have to do this. I present a principle, usually very simple in a few pages, to give you kind of a basic understanding of it. And then I present some what I call skill sets or tools, if you will, that give you some perspective that I felt would be useful for a person on the front lines who's just living their life and trying to do their best and get a little bit better. And amongst those skill sets, I never say, do these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'll be a good reader, and then go on your way. I say, you're your own boss. Here are some ideas, some skills. Does one of them resonate with you? Mm-hmm. Then focus on that, set a goal around it, And then you go back to the goal chapter, the planning chapter, and the goal chapter, right? And you say, okay, how do I do that? And then you work on one thing at a time. And if you do that, you will find one of the most common questions I get is, knew you? Who knew? Right? Is how long does it take for me to be new? Where is the new me at? How far in the future do I have to wait? Right? Do I got to do 20 push-ups every day for a year to become a new me? And so it's like, you know what? You can become a new you in a moment, and it could take a year. It's not a thing with a timeline. The idea is that you will never stop being the captain of your own life. So you relish the journey more than the end.
And right? It's really just learning, right? It's just learning. We're just learning how to deal. We're learning new tricks to deal, right? We're learning about ourselves and how, oh, geez, I wish I would have just put this in an organized fashion in my own mind 20 years ago.
Exactly. And I love that. Thank you for that, because that's really all that the book does, is it kind of puts these things in an organized fashion. And it presents these principles that are, I think, pretty straightforward when you look at it. And things that
you find inherently true, right? As you read, I'm sure you're just like, oh, yeah, I knew that, but I never just put it in that way.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So The book is about principles, and then there are tips, tricks, and techniques, the 3 T's I call them, because that's mostly what we find, right? It's all about life hacks or, this kind of jazz. But you know what? Life hacks without substance of principles behind it, what people find is that life is hollow, right? It's all about what I bolted on to get my goal, to get that fruit. We all want that fruit. It's the prize at the end of the rainbow kind of a thing. But instead, if we focus on the journey and alignment with the principles of human success, if we do that,
nature will take care of itself.
Exactly. And we will have more fruit. I never, ever once promised to become a millionaire or rich or any of that kind of stuff, because that is ridiculous. But
I really like you, David.
Yeah.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
So that's what the book is about. And I guess, and I hate to be, I'm not a salesman. When I was 18, my first job was selling Cutco knives.
I sold Cutco.
I
did for about a month. I don't think I made any money, but I did get a fantastic set of knives for like $165.
Well, exactly. And I got those things at a nice, you know what? Here's a plug for Cutco, since I didn't make them any money either. I still have those knives today, and they're great knives.
Oh, I have one left. I only have one left. I have the baker's one.
Oh yeah,
that's the spatula one with the knife on the side. That's the last one I have left, and it's great for everything.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah,
it's a small world.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I sold Cutco knives, and I realized I'm not a salesman. But I will just ask people, in the spirit of, if I have an apple, Reyshan, and you have an apple, and we were to exchange apples, how many apples do each of us have?
We still have an apple, sir.
We still each have one apple, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do.
But if I have an idea, and you have an idea, and we exchange ideas, how many ideas do we each have?
2.
We each have 2, don't we?
Yeah.
So in the spirit of a gift, if you buy the book and read the book, you will receive, I promise you will find something in there that you'll go, wow, I think I can apply that in my life, and my life will be better off. And if there's one thing, it's worth the price of the book in 100-fold.
Well, you're not a salesman, sir, but you just sold me.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah. Is there a lightning storm?
Yeah, that was thunder, and the electricity went out all around me.
Oh my gosh.
Luckily, we're all on battery power over here, so yay.
Well, that's like a sign from heaven, I think.
And my dog's freaking out. She does not like thunder. She is scared. It's okay, baby girl. It's okay. It's okay. Oh man, David, this has been super entertaining and enlightening and informative, and I really appreciate you being here. And thank you for writing that book. I'm going to get my hands on one. Where can anyone else go get your book?
So if you go to my website, it's simply my name, www.davidredwards.com. And it talks a little bit more about the backstory of the book, some of the reviews and things. And then you can click on it and it'll take you to Amazon. And it's in audiobook. So I just published the audiobook in June.
Nice.
It's on paperback and ebook.
Fantastic, sir. I'm looking forward to taking a look and being inspired again. Knew You, Who Knew by David Edwards. Go check it out. David, thank you so much again for being here. And we'll have to hang out again because I feel like we have a lot more to talk about.
This would be awesome.
Awesome, sir. Well, cheers and have a wonderful rest of your day. And ladies and gentlemen, go get his book. Go watch my television series. Cheers.